Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today I wanted to look at something that I don't think a lot of people are talking about when it comes to Pokemon card artwork, and that's the fact that in some areas the artwork has actually regressed over time. Now, if you've been in this space for even as low as a couple of months, you'll hear so many people talk about the reason why Scarlet and Violet era cards are worth so much money is because it is the era with the best artwork. Now, while there is an argument for that within specific things like illustration rares, that's not really the case overall, as many other factors when it comes to artwork have actually gotten worse with time. And that includes the Scarlet and Violet era still continuing a lot of these poor trends. And again, illustration rares really are alt arts, but let's get right into this. First of all, looking at shiny Pokemon. This is probably, no, this is the biggest downgrade. Shiny Pokemon cards have become borderline a joke in a lot of ways compared to what they used to be. Shiny Pokemon used to be truly special cards to pull. Now, there are four cards that go in this era that you're seeing on the left. The one that isn't shown is the Diamond and Pearl Platinum era ones, which I think everybody would agree are the weakest of the true OG great ones, as those are basically like a reverse holo with the shiny Pokemon. But the big three you think of are the shining cards from the Neo era, which had a really nice holo effect on the Pokemon themselves. You had the Gold Stars from the EX era, which had a Pokemon coming out of the actual box art, going into the card's borders and all that while being shiny with a really nice holo effect around pretty much the whole card. Then you had what I think was actually the best looking, which is the Black and White era shinies, which had the great gold textured foil around the entire border, had the energy or the type of the Pokemon holographed in the little attack area, and then the actual Pokemon had a holographic effect as well. These were beautiful cards. If you've ever owned one of these Black and White era shinies, you know how good they are. But again, even though I think that is the best, these are all still really, really solid ones. That's compared to nowadays, where shiny Pokemon get absolutely no special treatment. You heard that right. They are not treated special. You have what started in the Sun and Moon era, which was the most pathetic thing they did, which is the shiny vault stuff, which basically just made a blank background. These were the best, by the way. The one I'm showing you, the Eevee, this is the best version of these. But were end up becoming blank backgrounds with these little stars around, and it's a holograph effect. It's a little bit of a special holograph effect at times, but that's about it with a shiny Pokemon. Essentially, no real change from a regular card. It is insanely basic and does not make them feel special whatsoever. You can even go back to the X and Y era for doing something similar to this, where the X and Y era shinies in Steam Siege were just way too easy to pull, making them not special despite them being a dual type, which we hadn't seen in such a very long time. But again, the shiny vault stuff that started was really sad. And then we also got the issue of, instead of making the shiny cards actually different, they were just the same cards with a shiny Pokemon. Again, the Charizard GX, this is an iconic card, but it's insanely basic and really isn't special. They just did a full art Charizard and turned him shiny. Now, the SIRs and IRs from Paldean Fates did make new artworks for them, but again, it's a special illustration rare. It's illustration rares, the same thing that normal Pokemon are getting, you made for shinies. What made the OG shiny cards so special was that they were truly unique. Again, that's why those three on the left are the holy trinity of shiny Pokemon cards. The shinings were unique to everything else at the time. The gold stars were special, the Pokemon coming out of the artwork, having a little gold star logo, the holograph effect everywhere in the card. The Black and White era cards. Now, when compared to the trainers, they were a bit similar, but in terms of actual Pokemon, they were fully special. Nowadays, shiny Pokemon are just really basic. When you pull a shiny Pokemon, it's not a big deal because now you have sets that have, over 50 of them, usually upwards of like 75 to 100 of them. Now, do I like the fact that you are able to get a shiny Pokemon for a lot more than you used to? That is a good thing. But the other issue is that they have done repeats for some of these, as some Pokemon have gotten numerous shiny cards. Again, Charizard is a prime example of that one. And you have a lot of them that just keep getting them, to where you have bunches of starters, never have had shiny Pokemon. Bunches of legendaries, never had shinies. So you ended up increasing the amount of shinies in the sets, but you made them specialty sets, and you still use the same few over and over, to where you're only actually adding maybe like 40 new ones at a time. Not a great idea, if I'm being honest. And I think that's part of the issue, is that the fact that they are now specialty sets almost exclusively kind of takes away from the speciality of them pulling. Now, even in the Sword and Shield era, I think that those ones were done relatively well. The gold cards that you would get in the Sword and Shield era, where you would pull the gold card with a shiny Pokemon on it, I think those ones are solid. I don't think they were as good as the Black and White era ones, but I think those are still solid-ish. Those are definitely the best ones we've had in this time, because that was before they made gold cards just regular Pokemon, which they started doing back in, Scarlet and Violet. And yes, I know Zashi and Zamazenta were, but those were the first sets. But overall, shiny Pokemon, the art has definitely regressed with shiny Pokemon. The fact that they've gone from being truly special, unique cards to just being basic cards, or just literally the exact same thing as the non-shiny versions, is definitely a big downgrade. Now, the next one, it might be a bit more controversial, but I'm going to go with the EX cards. I think that the lowercase EXs, and I mean the original lowercase EXs, are still the best EX designs that we have had of all time. Now, this is going for mainly just EX cards. As for the Mega EXs, I actually think those ones are usually solid. Those ones usually had a ton more stuff going around and going on in the cards. And the fact they had, the either Japanese or English, depending on which language the actual card is, basically the opposite language for their attack, was a really cool touch. When it comes to regular EXs, whether it be the Black and White era, the X and Y era, or the Scarlet and Violet era, I still think that the EX era was the best when it comes to these artworks. A lot of that mainly comes down to the Holo effect. Now, I think the Delta Species one was probably the weakest, though I do like the fact the actual Pokemon was holographic, and I think that was definitely cool, and it made them unique compared to the other ones. But especially the E-Reader ones, i.e. the early EX era sets, having that massive bottom border thanks to the E-Reader part with that great silver holographic effect just made them look so nice. And I think that that's part of the thing, is when it comes to overcomplicating a design or doing too much. I think that a lot of the modern ones do that. They do too much on the modern EXs compared to the past ones. So you gotta remember, EX cards are not massively special. They're not full arts, they're not secret rares, they're not illustration rares, they're not alt arts. They're not something insanely special. They are just this higher tier. They're the tier right after holographs, for being honest. And it should reflect that. The new ones really don't. I think that the new ones just go for a bit too much. Again, having like the silver border, I actually think was kind of a downgrade, if I'm being honest, for some of the more modern ones. But like, even when you look at like the Zekrom and Lucario ones, like, yes, the Lucario card is a great design, having, the Aura Sphere coming out, and then of course you have the Zekrom and the fact that, they're coming out of the box art, which is a really cool thing. But as mentioned, the Gold Stars I think did it better because it was, a truly special card. Whereas the new EX is just kind of, I don't know, when you hold these side by side, this is one of those where using pictures doesn't do full justice. If you've held a true EX era card next to a modern EX card, you'll know the old one just looks better. When you hold it in the light, when you hold it in the darkness, it just looks better. The holographic effect going around the entire border, especially the e-reader ones, just pops so much compared to these modern ones, which don't really have any real special effect. The most you'll get is like a couple having like a pattern on them. But again, those are more like the Radiant Collection ones. The Radiant Collection EXs were solid, but overall, I think that EXs have downgraded in terms of artwork and all that. I think the old ones were better. They usually had just, they were able to tell a lot in the box that they had, and it just looked better. So, again, I think this is definitely one of the more controversial ones, but I stand by it, and the old EX cards are better than the new ones. I think it's part of the reason why they're still worth as much as they are. Obviously, the rarity of them and the condition sensitivity of them is a big deal, but I think another lesser part of it is the fact that they are just more desired by people who've actually seen them, especially the e-reader ones. Those ones just blow so many of these modern ones away. Now we have full arts, and this is full art 2 prize Pokemon. The reason I do 2 prize is because like regular full arts have been around and really have been the same. Like the X and Y, like Magearna collection full arts, like, which are basically alt arts, those full arts have been the same for literally a decade. But when it comes to the 2 prize full arts, i.e. like EX, GX, V full arts, they've gotten worse. And this is one that I don't think anyone's going to defend this one. The artwork for full arts is pathetic compared to what it used to be. Now, back in the Heart Gold and Silver era, you had the first ones being obviously the Legend cards. Now, just for the sake of making an easier picture, this is the jumbo version of the Palkia Dialga, but you'd have 2 cards that are horizontal, you put them on top of each other, and then boom, you'd have your Legend card. So they're each full arts, but you connect them to make a bigger one, which you've seen with Scarlet and Violet illustration rares where you're supposed to connect them. Those cards, insane. As I've already mentioned before in a previous video, it is a very legitimate argument that we have still never beaten those cards in terms of artwork. That even the best SIRs still cannot compete with the worst legend cards just because of how insanely good those ones are. But let's go away from those ones. What about the black and white era EXs? Well, those were better. The texture effects was really, really there with those ones, and the design, especially for the plasma ones, were just great. I mean, this Lugia EX just blows like every single full art in the modern era away. And then, of course, like the Mewtwo EX. Again, the Gengar from the thumbnail is another great example. What about the Mewtwo? As you can tell from this picture, it's the fact that the full art texture is special. That's a big thing. These old ones had a much better rainbow effect to where that a lot of people will actually think you have a fake because they don't know the EX or the XY era of cards. And it's part of what makes them so good. The fact they have that effect that we really don't have anymore, and the fact that the texture is so special on them, that's compared to even the GX era. Even starting with the GX era, they just went down in quality. Even though I think the texture of the GX era is actually really solid, the big issue is the backgrounds just disappear. They pretty much never had backgrounds. Then the V era usually had like these weird colored backgrounds like the Espeon V. In fact, this is one of the ones that has the most amount of detail in the background. And then now you have the Scarlet and Violet era, which are, again, pretty much the same thing, where it's like nothing going on, and it's insanely basic. And the fact that now we have these secret rare gold cards that aren't special, they just use the card. You'll get the same card in a gold one, making this, the full art, even less special. The full art 2 prizers, outside of the shiny cards, are the biggest downgrades in the franchise's history. And I think some people would even argue these are the biggest ones. Again, the trainers. They've been solid. I've mentioned there are some full art trainers in the Scarlet and Violet era, like Crispin, that are better than their SIR counterparts. But when it comes to the actual Pokemon, the 2 prize Pokemon, the ones that are supposed to be special, the new ones just suck compared to the old ones. And remember, it's not even like now you have these better versions like SIRs. Because even the X and Y era, you had the gold cards. I mean, this was a breakthrough Mewtwo. You had 2 gold cards that would be considered alt arts in today's time that were in that same set. And you can do the same thing for like Fates Collide. You can do the same thing for Breakpoint. It's not that. It's just that they put more effort into them. They would have backgrounds that would actually have some sort of connection or would just be a background that was nice to look at. Compared to the ones we have now where it's pretty much either no background like the Sun and Moon era, a insanely weird but still pointless background like the V's, or nothing like the EX era or the Scarlet and Violet era. Compared to what used to be, again, the legend cards from Heart Gold, Soul Silver, we've really never seen any artwork top them. Then the black and white era full art EXs were still better, and then the X and Y EXs full arts were still better. So when you look at it, the overall full arts have been a massive downgrade. So when people talk about, the Scarlet and Violet era having the best artwork of all time, this is another example. That's not really the case because this is another area where the artwork has actually declined. Now, the other more controversial one is going to be Secret Rare Trainers. I actually think the new Secret Rare Trainers are worse than the old ones. This is one of those where I don't even think it's simplicity. I think the new ones actually are too simple. The new Secret Rare Trainer starting in Sun and Moon would just put the item in the middle of the card, make it bigger, and then have it be gold. That's it. Compared to the older ones, which the Pokemon Catcher is the first one. I'm not really talking about that one. I just wanted to show because of the history. But the after that one, black and white and X and Y era ones. What you would instead do is just like the shiny black and white Pokemon, you would end up instead of the type, you put a Pokeball logo in the bottom part of the card, have it have the holographic effect, have the gold textured foil around the card, and obviously the top of it where it says trainer and what the item is. And you have that same effect on the actual item itself as well. This made for cards that really popped in person, looked beautiful, compared to the new ones, which all feel the exact same. I think the big issue is that when you make them all like this, there's really no specialty between them. And it's kind of weird because you'd think it'd be opposite effect considering the item is bigger, but I actually disagree with that one. Because of the fact that these older ones, or the old ones, still had the basic look. Of course, you had the text of what the item was going on top of the Pokeball effect in the regular trainer part, which meant that if you had big text versus small text, it felt a lot different compared to these other ones where it just is kind of the same because it's a text on nothing. You know what I mean? You still have a bunch of text on it, but it's on the actual item or on nothing compared to the old ones, which was on the card like originally intended. And the fact that you had the actual holographic or the textured effect on the item itself made the item pop more as well than these newer ones. I think this is definitely a downgrade that is very legitimate because I've owned both of these ones, owned the original Secret Rare Trainers and the new ones. The new ones just aren't as good as the old ones. This is one of those where they thought that, making it fully gold was better. But again, sometimes less is more. Sometimes you need less of the card to be holographic or textured and it actually looks better than the newer ones. This is a prime example of that one because the older ones, like if you've held these in person, you'll know the originals were better. The XY era, the black and white era after the Pokemon Catcher were just better. The Pokemon Catcher itself even isn't that terrible. Having the actual catcher be special effect was definitely a cool one, and you still had the Pokeball effect on it. But mainly the ones that came after that one, they just pop more. They're just better ones. So that's my somewhat hot take. But I feel like if you've been around these ones, you'll probably agree. And finally, we have Holo and Reverse Holo cards. Now, the Reverse Holo is to a slightly lesser extent, but I still stand by it. But the holograph effect is very obvious. Holo cards have regressed immensely. Especially now that they're one per pack, it doesn't have the same speciality as it used to. I mean, hell, even back in like the X and Y era, when you pulled a Holo, you were happy about it because, it was still like 1 in 4 pack pull. Nowadays, obviously you get a Holo in every pack. Sword and Shield, it felt like you got one almost every other pack. But the actual Holo effects have just been worse. Sword and Shield had this really weird top-down effect that just was like trying to be special but wasn't. And the new ones for Scarlet and Violet, while I do like the fact that the actual border is holographic, it's a super basic holographic effect. It's shocking, but man, Sun and Moon is up there for the best of all time. Sun and Moon had this beautiful wavy holo effect that just made like every single card look special. And it was really cool. Not just special in like, the Cosmos Holo where like, oh, well, the big circle is here versus there. No, it just made them look special. That was a great holo effect. The fact that we went from Sun and Moon to Sword and Shield's holo effect is really pathetic. Now, of course, you have the OG effect, which is more in line with the Cosmos effect. They still have it with, special things, but this should be the main one. The old ones are better. When you look at things like the EX era or Diamond and Pearl Platinum era, the holos in those eras just are so much nicer. The fact that it's, this sparkly effect, the Cosmos stuff, some would have swirls, obviously have circles and all that, made them pop, especially in the right light. With a holo card, if you're in the right light, it should really pop. The new ones don't. But the old ones, like the Sun and Moon, which isn't even that old, like the Sun and Moon, like the EX and Diamond and Pearl era, really do pop. They're beautiful. And as for reverse holos, you could make a really good case. It's just pretty much since the EX era, they've kind of fallen off. Because the EX era, especially like midway through, ended up having this where they'd either have these Pokeballs or they'd have the type logos around the entire background of the artwork of the Pokemon. And they'd end up having the logo of the set placed on it, like this one, EX Emerald, while having the name and HP actually be specially holographic effect as well. To the point where a lot of these reverse holos are actually worth more than the holo counterparts, which is pretty wild. Now, even the black and white era also had that to an extent. Now, the X and Y era kind of copied the black and white era in a lot of ways, where they pretty much just had the type logo just repeating over and over. And while we have seen that with Scarlet and Violet and Sword and Shield, they've been done in ways that, again, it's doing too much. Having a very clear pattern instead of just feeling like you have a pattern, you know what I mean? Like, the ones from Scarlet and Violet, I think that they just, I don't know. I think that having each one of them be the exact same like this, having the pattern like that, and especially the Sword and Shield one where it's like a very concise, meant-to-be pattern, I don't think fits as well as the ones from the Black and White and X and Y era. But again, at least with the EX era, reverse holos, we've definitely regressed since then. I think that when you look at the more modern ones, they've, realized that people, it feels like they've put less passion into them by making them just super concise. Like, sometimes art is not supposed to be super basic like this, where it's like, okay, we're going to put, the psychic energy in this little arrow, and they're all going to be perfect pattern, nothing changing. Compared to the older ones, which, while they had a set pattern, they looked special and looked different. And the new ones just feel like they're trying to make it special, but it's just the same. But mainly the holo effects have definitely gotten worse. The holos are the ones that I think everybody knows just suck compared to what they used to. And again, when you go back to the Sun and Moon era, which is just a few years ago, and you went from that to Sword and Shield, is actually pretty funny. Like, that's pathetic that they regressed that hard, that quick when it comes to the holographic effect. But the reverse holos, the EX era, everybody knows they've regressed since then. But I think that really the X and Y era was the last era of, like, really great reverse holos. Not to, throw any shade at Sun and Moon era. But overall, I think that's the holo and reverse holo cards. But overall, that'll do it. This has been ZomFox. If you've gotten this far into the video and you enjoyed it, please like the video and subscribe to the channel as well, as you do at least one card video every week. We're getting to the point where we're doing pretty much like 2 a week, Hopefully I keep this up. I might go back to one, but we're doing at least like 2 a week. Again, art has not been this just purely linear upwards graph in terms of quality as much as people will try to make you believe it is. The Scarlet Valley era, like I've said it before, in terms of pure artwork for cards, I think that X, Y, and Sun and Moon are the peak up until this point in terms of overall card art. It just depends on which areas you actually prefer more. Do you prefer like the actual alt art being more traditional alt art style, which then will be Sun and Moon, because you also have the rainbow cards, which were the best rainbow cards we've had in the franchise's history. Even though of 2 eras, you know that the Sun and Moon era was just better. And pretty much like Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet, while they have the cards that do look great, like illustration rares and alt arts, the actual sets just aren't as good. Hell, I could have made another argument just for the actual basic card artwork. As when you go back and look at like sets like the Heart Gold Soul Silver era, the base cards in those sets were gorgeous compared to a lot of the more modern ones. It's not because the modern artwork is bad, it's just not as good as what it used to be. But mainly when it comes to like chase cards and specialty cards, it feels like the Pokemon or Nintendo or Pokemon Company has pretty much only focused on the highest end cards and have kind of left the rest on, just to go die in the curb or whatever. Because when you look at things, again, like the regular EX design, especially the shiny Pokemon, full arts, they have regressed so much so quickly, it is insane. So let me know your thoughts down below. Do you agree with these ones? Do you actually have other suggestions in terms of artwork that's actually regressed over time? Let me know down below, and as always, guys, have a great night.